I don't know if she's recording or not. I'm not hearing a word back. Something going on here, but I'm not sure what. I'm sure Terry is trying to patch us in. Is she trying to reach us? Oh, there she goes.
Yeah, Shirley says it is recording.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Shirley. I just want to continue prattling on with nobody in the audience. Yeah, well, like I said, it's been a geomagnetic storm up here, and we've had problems with communications and computers all week long because of it. And I just hope that we maintain enough of a connection here and are able to continue the broadcast tonight. Basically, everything that we had planned is going well. We did secure the property. We are in the process of doing all of the changeover type stuff that has to go on, which is a lot of electronics, a lot of computer things, a lot of service issues like getting services established or services changed over to our names. Very exciting times here. So the banking is going forward, lickety split. The plans for the vendor cards have progressed at leaps and bounds. We are working on consolidating claims from the Sign in America program, and all the essential accounts have been set up, the accounts for each state. We are going to be looking at each state's readiness in terms of, are they ready to deploy funds? Do they have a plan for deploying funds? Do they have responsible people in place? Before we are going to give out large amounts of money to the states, to the assemblies, we want to be assured that the assemblies are functioning properly, of course. And so that will require having an elected treasurer and having oversight and having signers who are competent to sign checks in each state. And hopefully we'll have some sort of a generalized budget for where this money needs to go, as going forward. And this is information that we had asked for some months ago when we first started this venture of getting the bank set up and all the rest of it. So hopefully everybody has been following along and doing their part, and it won't be too much of a delay for any of the states to meet those simple requirements that we set out, because they've had plenty of warning that this was coming. And now we have individual state accounts set up within the bank, or banks, I should say, because of course in our system it's bilateral and we have two banks. So all of that is just going lickety split, I'm pleased to say.
Yeah.
And we're hoping that we're going to be able to do the Sign in America, the backlog of Sign in America claims. We're hoping that that can happen in October or early November.
Wonderful. That's very exciting.
And, yes, and then those people will each have their vendor cards.
Yay, fantastic.
Yes.
Yay.
Yes. So that will be a
So
wonderful.
you have the state account set up in both the American States and Nations Bank and the wholly owned commercial subsidiary Global Family Bank?
We have them in Global Family Bank. Remember, Global Family is a subsidiary, right? So you have Global Family Bank, that's a trade bank. Then you have the Global Family Commercial Bank, which is a commercial bank that's owned by the trade bank. And then we have our own bilateral bank, which is the American States and Nations Bank and Asan Commercial Bank.
Oh, I
Okay, so
see.
you've got this two-tiered system that kind of connects the two layers of the cake, if you will.
Yes.
So we can function both in the commercial credit world and deal with fiat currencies, and we can also function with the trade bank and deal with gold and silver and all of those other things. So all of that has been exhausting and wonderful, and we've made great progress. And we're really looking forward to the next few weeks, because it's going to be very exciting and very forward-looking, and everybody who has been suffering and going without and being terrorized by bill collectors will get a break that is long awaited and long deserved. So believe you me, we're keeping that on the front burner for everybody. Then our marshals, I have to tell you, we have got whiz kids among us. I want to brag about our Continental marshals, because they took exhaustive tests this week and they all passed with A's. They all scored above 90. In fact, all of them scored above 95.
Yay, good job.
You guys went above. You just.
That's so fantastic, because I know they were studying so hard.
And they all aced it.
That's
They
so
all did.
fantastic. Good job, guys. Yay.
Yes. And they will be justly rewarded. They have some constitutional studying to do, and they have some coordination to do, and they each will get a final interview. You know, we'll have a group interview, and then we'll have a one-on-one with each marshal as they're commissioned. And then we will have our program well and truly up and flying, and all of the accoutrements will be in place. And we are just so blessed that we have such good people who are so serious and determined to do the jobs and do them right, and who have studied so long and so hard. And I have to admit that when I see performance like that, it just reinforces the need for people to get serious and to study the material and study the structure of the assemblies, and realize that this is not politics as usual. This isn't about politics at all. This is about your country and about your birthright and about your private property and your good name, and things that are much more fundamental than Republican and Democrat, or whose crony gets to spend what now. This is your country. This is your life, where you live. It's the quality of the food that you eat. It's the security of the roof over your head. And, our marshals have shown us that kind of dedication and kind of seriousness in terms of really bearing down, paying attention, and getting it right. And so, I feel very competent people have come forward, and I feel confident that they are going to do themselves and the service honor. And they've all gone above and beyond in their studies and in their dedication and determination to provide peacekeeping forces in the international jurisdiction right where we need them most. So, hats off and congratulations to the guys, and I'm looking forward to meeting each and every one of them, and I'm looking forward to, being able to provide them with their official commissions and with all of the bells and whistles that go with it. And what I'm really, 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 truly looking forward to is being able to establish a academy where we can train more marshals and where each state will have the ability to train their militia captains, the directors of their militia, and have that kind of support at a central facility. And we can just start the whole process with small groups and work out and do the training from each small group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And you mentioned that you wanted the marshals to be the shining example of peacekeeping, and it sounds like they're delivering.
They really are. Well, they are the highest officers in the international jurisdiction. They are the land overstands the sea on the land. So our peacekeeping officials are higher than any sea jurisdiction official. And the only place that is any different is when they're actually on federal property that has been officially turned over by the state. So,
turned over by the state, meaning?
The state actually has to act upon a land grant or a land lease to the federal government corporations. And if you read the constitutions, you'll see that there was a set-aside provision that the federal government would be given land to use as like a use permit for things like army bases and arsenals, docks, secure facilities for their activities. But in most cases, what has happened is that the federales were given a long-term lease on land. They were not given land by the state legislature or by, and it has to be our state legislature, or rather our state assembly, that gives them that land. Otherwise, they don't have land. So for example, Washington, D.C. actually still belongs to Maryland and Virginia. It has a long-term lease, a usage permit, I guess you would call it, a special purpose lease. But the land itself was never ceded by the state of Maryland or the state of Virginia. So, and that's pretty typical throughout the United States, that instead of granting the federal government a piece of land, the federal government was only given a long-term lease, a special purpose lease on various land that they needed for, the accomplishment of their duties. And we have yet to do what would you call it? An audit?
Reassess. Yeah.
Yes, because we have to identify all the federal installations, federal highways, federal this, federal that, to establish, number one, What are the conditions under which they were given permission to establish this, right? And if it was a lease, why haven't we been paid for the lease? The individual states, have they been paid for a lease?
No.
And if not, if this hasn't been going into some slush fund all these years, well, that just adds up more money that is owed to the state and to the people of that state by the federal corporations. And
Right.
so, there are a lot of issues yet to be settled here. Don't expect this to happen overnight. But be aware that
Exactly.
there are these concerns and these issues that need to be addressed. And, we have to stand up, raise our hands, and look at these things as fiduciaries of this country for ourselves and for our children. And we really cannot afford, and I want to put that bluntly, we cannot afford to let the foxes run the hen house anymore.
No,
And so,
definitely not. What we found here in Washington is that in some cases, they've actually sold the buildings to another corporation, and they are then leasing the space from that corporation.
We've had a lot of what we thought were public buildings being sold here too. And this just means that we're going to have to track down these corporations in the international venues and bring them the bill. For example, the IRS. All of these are just corporations, and most of them would be bankrupted upon presentation of the kinds of billings that are owed.
Mm-hmm.
So, we had hoped to repurpose the IRS, but if they don't come to terms, then they'll be bankrupted.
Mm-hmm.
One way or the other, they're either going to... I'm sorry, Terry, you're kind of coming through a little bit garbled this evening.
I'm sorry, Anna. I'm sorry. I'm having a lot of technical difficulties tonight, and so I had to switch a number of systems and cameras and that type of thing. So I apologize for that. I was just saying that's interesting that about the IRS that they would either be liquidated or bankrupted. So what would determine the difference between those two?
Well, basically, the IRS is just a service. They're basically just an accounting service with an enforcement function that was never allowed to them in this country. And so they're only supposed to be addressing the employees of the federal corporations, right? But they've been addressing everybody and misaddressing everybody and, foisting adhesion contracts onto everybody without anyone knowing it. And, they've basically been acting as privateers without a license. And they've done this offshore. They've been operating under foreign law in Puerto Rico for years and years and years and operating under the Spanish law of the Inquisition. Well, then their next trick, when they were discovered in Puerto Rico and brought up by, the hair of their head, they have tried to skip off to the Ladrones, the Mariana Islands, and redo the same thing. Well, we've made it clear that no matter where they go, they're going to be hunted down for what they've done, and they're going to be, apprehended. They're going to be held to account for any kind of continuing misaddressing Americans. They can make whatever they want to make a condition of employment. And all they're going to do is find that there are few and far between federal employees anymore because, it was outrageous that they taxed the federal employees on their wages to begin with. much less that they extended this practice to Americans, their employers, and that none of this was made public and none of this was explained, and that people were coerced into signing up and applying for things that didn't apply to them, and then were taxed. And so all of this chicanery, all of this fraud has been discovered, and, you know, the IRS is just an accounting service. They don't care what they're collecting. They don't know what they're collecting. And I think we've had more than one IRS official come forward and say, I didn't know any of this. And then we have people like Joe Bannister, who long ago stood up and said, what? So we have lots of witnesses now. We have Joe Bannister, Sherry Jackson, and half a dozen more former IRS employees who quit when they figured out that what they were doing was wrong. And, you know, at this point, the IRS is the one on the fence. They're the ones that are being pushed backwards. They're the ones that are in the wrong. And even those that, even in the corporate arena. Now, we've got this terrible problem. All these people signed up as corporations. They put their businesses in they incorporated their businesses without knowing that they were registering their business and giving it away to the control of the state organization that they were chartering with, or even worse, the U.S. corporation in Washington, D.C. Okay? So what do you do when not only the people in a country have been basically defrauded, but you have hundreds, thousands of American corporations that have been defrauded in this manner? And you also have the actual ultimate owner of all of this are the American states and people. Because remember, the U.S. only acts under delegated power, right?
Right.
So you've got this situation where you've got a middleman that's come in and created this entire hoax, this entire fraud, seeking to benefit and enrich itself under conditions of fraud and under false presumptions of war against third parties. What are you going to do? I think the very best thing that could be done is for them to just roll up the sidewalks and admit that they've done this and quit the field.
Yeah.
You know, I keep reading all of this psychotic meandering in the quote-unquote intel that everybody gets across their desk every day, you know, and it sounds like something out of Hollywood. You know,
Right.
They're going to have all these big events, and, you know, it's going to be a full-scale, phantasmagorical, whatever the hell they think it's going to be. They're going to have false flags here and false flags there, and they're going to whip the world up into a nuclear war event and go to DEFCON 1, and then they're going to go right up to the limit, and then they're going to breathe a big sigh of relief and say, oh, we avoided that one. That's so much BS. That is so much unnecessary, nasty, stupid BS that I can't even begin to comprehend why anyone would do any of that. I mean, the facts are bad enough as they are, without trying to drum it up into something it's not. The facts, people, are that nuclear weapons have been totally obsolete for over 30 years. I mean, they are so obsolete that they don't even maintain the nuclear facilities as anything serious. The computers for the launch codes on the nuclear weapons are from MS-DOS, okay? Are you imagining the little floppy disks? Those of you who are old enough to remember floppy disks and MS-DOS and, yes? Okay. Don't even get me started. This whole idea about nuclear weapons, it's nonsense. It's been nonsense. Anyone who really knows anything will tell you the same thing. No, don't believe that. That's just BS. And here they are. They want to get everybody terrified of a nuclear war when they long ago left nuclear war behind and came up with worse things that are more personal and more disgusting, if I may.
Right.
So,
And
go ahead, Terry. I'm sorry.
well, I was just going to say, the State of the Nation had an article calling out the whole Q PSYOP as a PSYOP for what it was, and which we've been talking about for years now. It was pretty obvious because those types of things, keep you on your couch because they tell you, oh, don't worry, they've got it all under control. You don't need to do anything, and somebody's going to come to the rescue, and they're going to ride in on their white horse, and on and on. Yeah. And then the rest of it is just fear mongering. It's going to be a big EMP attack, and oh my gosh, nuclear war, we're going to come to the brink of nuclear war, and
we have very real problems, but they're real problems. They're not Hollywood. And they're based on current, up-to-date weapons, not things that never actually existed in the first place and which haven't been seriously pursued for 30 years. I mean, I've pointed out to everyone that no atomic bombs ever fell on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. That's a big, fat, provable lie. If you look at Japan today, what is it? 45, 55, 75 years later, Nagasaki and Hiroshima are doing just fine, thank you very much. They are entirely populated, they are restored, they are functioning, they are full of people. And guess what? When you do nuclear, real nuclear, you get Sodom and Gomorrah. You get things turned to glass 5 feet under the surface of the ground, and it never comes back. Not in thousands of years. So, you can just look at Nagasaki and Hiroshima today and know for a fact that no nuclear explosion ever occurred there. Period. Just bogus BS. What they unleashed was a new kind of incendiary bomb. And that's what we've been kept in the dark about. That's what we've been lied to about for 75 years. That's why people were building bunkers in their basements. This is, we have been lied to. And all of this idea that we had to spend such great amounts of money keeping Iran from having nuclear power is BS too. It's just complete, utter, it's hokum. So, in a world like this, where you're being lied to constantly, you do not know who to believe or about what. You have to use your own good sense and observational skills to figure these things out. Because if you are depending on the government to tell you the truth, you might as well hope for pennies to fall from the sky. I mean, this government has been dishonest for so long that there is absolutely no reason to think that anything they tell you is right or true. I mean, zero reason to think that anything they tell you is right or true. I mean, if they could lie about the atomic bomb, what else can they lie about?
Everything.
Right. And why do you have former chiefs of the CIA like Michael Hayden talking in these gratuitous tones of joy and rapture about the post-truth age? Now, he was not talking about some great denouement that was going to happen, some apocalyptic exposure behind the curtain. He was talking about a world in which lies are the basis of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And this is coming from a former CIA director, where it's all just nothing but propaganda and lies and telling people whatever they want to tell us. You know, telling us that we're free while we're enslaved.
Right.
That's a pretty good one too, isn't it? A nice, great, big, fat one, where they had us down and chained and, you know, we're basically raping, pillaging, and plundering at will, and at the same time telling us how free we were.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, all of those who are old enough to have suffered it, when's the last time you laid in your bed awake, worried about the IRS? How free did that make you feel? And when you looked at the pay stub for your earnings for the week or the month, and you look at, oh, there's a FICA tax and there's a a tax, it's a long list. And more than half of your earnings are going to pay for what? More government overlap and overreach into your pocketbook is what you're seeing. And that tax is on what? It's on your labor, on your energy, your skill, your time on earth. And where, tell me, is there anything in any act of any Congress ever, anywhere, saying that they had any ability to tax your energy, your time on earth, your labor? Again, doesn't exist.
Right.
Absolutely does not exist. And the truth of the matter is that the income tax was placed upon federal employees as a condition of employment. If you didn't want to pay the income tax, then you didn't take a federal job, pure and simple.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's placed in your mind like that, and you know it, and you're going, oh, I don't want a federal job if I have to pay 30% of it back to the employer. You know, how many people would take federal jobs if they knew that right up front? Let me see the hands in the back of the room.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they did. They made the income tax a tax on the wages of federal employees and dependents. And if you are not a federal employee or dependent, not only do you not owe a federal income tax, you don't owe them the sweat of your brow. You owe them nothing. In fact, if they've been collecting from you under false pretenses, they owe you a nice big fat settlement, plus they need to be paying you the interest on that. So the IRS was given an opportunity to act as a kind of reverse collection agency, and instead of collecting, restoring funds that are owed to people.
Mm-hmm.
And as yet, they're sitting there dithering and continuing, trying to go on as if everything were normal when it's not.
Right. Right. They're still trying to pull shenanigans and, collect taxes from people.
who
Yeah.
are not federal employees or dependents.
No, absolutely not. Well, Anna, in your most recent article, 3328, for the military, in that you give information and instruction. Is it the military's job to liquidate corporations?
In this case, yes. In this case, the justice system will not do it and cannot do it because the justice system has been rolled into the executive branch.
Mm.
We don't have a three-branch government at any level anymore. And it's been that way since 1990s. They changed the verbiage of the judicial oath so as to make a distinct cut, a division from the Constitution and the application of justice. They basically cut out the language that obliged the judge to make their rulings amenable to or friendly to the Constitution. And that then set the judiciary free to act like the rotten, spoiled children they are. And so they no longer have a judicial oath that means anything. That's why all these people who are out, banging on the table and saying, "What about your oath? What about your oath?" Well, they don't have an oath to the Constitution. That went out the window in the 1990s. In fact, I wrote an article about it. Mm-hmm. We found that when we were out spelunking around and researching different topics, and we looked at that and we went, look, they messed with the language of the judicial oath back in the early 90s. I think it was during Clinton's administration. And, well, whoopee-ding-dong, there they did it. They took out that crucial language that forced the judiciary to pay attention to the Constitution. Oof, there it went.
So, right. What about the bond? Do the bonds exist anymore?
No, the corporations they're not public offices. So since they're not public offices, the corporations looked at the situation and said, oh, well, it's not really a public office, so we can self-insure. At which point they began by, they all set up risk management departments whose job it is to protect the corporation from claims by the public or employees. Mm-hmm. And so you have a complaint against the court or you have a complaint against the department of whatever, and many of these departments shouldn't even exist, by the way, but you have a complaint, and so you take it through the administrative hoops, and it gets up to the level of the governor, and the governor looks at it and says, well, maybe we do owe Mr. Olson here $50,000 in damages because of blah, 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 blah. And so Mr. Olson then goes to the risk management people, and the risk management people say, we're not going to pay you. And then it's up to you to figure out how you're going to get paid. So you see, it's all a dirty deal. It's all inside house. It's all, it's a private corporation functioning as a government instead of a government. And there is no justice, and there is no pretense of justice anymore. You're just going to have to stand up and do your own work, set up your own courts, and tell these pikers to go. Because otherwise, they're going to sit here and continue to rape, plunder, and pillage to their heart's delight. And they must be made to feel in the minority. Okay? We just have to gather in the numbers We have to get to a position and a point where we have people that are clear, level-headed, with peaceful intent, but great determination to just knock these people right out of their seats and clear these courts, put their courts back into strictly limited jurisdiction where they have to obey the rules of admiralty or the rules of commerce, whichever is appropriate, but has nothing to do with average Americans. And we have to do that ourselves, for our kids, for our country. And that's a big part of what we're here to do. You know, there are the four pillars of the assembly. And one of them is the Judicial Assembly. Now, we've got some really good materials coming out that will explain the Judicial Assembly process in greater detail, and which will explain being a juror in greater detail, which will explain jury nullification in greater detail. And
Fantastic.
we will go through that with all of the assemblies. We will start having a help service for the assemblies. We'll have initially we'll set up 5 state groups, and we'll have a coordinator type person to be announced what this person's position or name or whatever will be. But every 5 states will have someone who works with them to answer questions and specifically to support them in setting up their treasury, setting up their Judicial Assembly, and dealing with some of the more technical issues, like getting really good, safe computer systems set up. And so we're going to have technical teams that will help on a 5-state basis. You'll have someone that you can call at the Federation and say, hey, we want to do this. How do we do it?
Great.
And so that'll be a great help to all the assemblies, and that will be a great help to us too, frankly, because trying to do our job plus take care of 50 assemblies and all of the different issues that can arise is frankly exhausting, and it takes away from our ability to do our real job, which has nothing to do with what goes on within the country. The Federation is actually supposed to be focused on international and global affairs. And so we're looking forward to having enough people trained up and having enough support material, videotape programs, books, flashcard type material so that you get things very clear and very simple. To be able to set up our courts. Yes?
I love flashcards.
Flashcards work.
Yeah.
And so we're really looking forward to that. And we're beginning to put money toward it. We're beginning to put money, clumps of money into printing and into those sorts of things that I think will very much help people when they come into an assembly, to help orient them and get the basics down right out of the box. Because frankly, a lot of the problems that we see in the assemblies are from new people coming in with their own ideas about what is and is not, trying to grab hold and, commandeer something and make it into something other than what an assembly is.
Right.
So,
and it's important that people understand that this is a process that's not open to interpretation. We have a path that we must follow.
Exactly. It's not some sort of freewheeling thing. We are restoring a government that has a structure and a purpose and an entire history, okay? We're not just going out and acting as anarchists and saying, oh, we don't want any government. And we're not coming in here as, avengers. We're going to go back and we're going to, claim blood and scalp for the last 160 years. We're here to solve problems, and we're here to restore our government to full function, because our government has been limping along like a 12-cylinder engine on 4 cylinders. It's just... Okay, so this is the tune-up crew. We're going to do it right. We're going to get it back. And that's the game plan here. People that want to go storm Capitol buildings, and people that want to get into race riots, and people that want to play the old, Republican Democrat game and all of that, they don't belong in an American assembly. It's called an American assembly for a reason. Okay, and we want to get away from the power mongering. We want to get away from the compartmentalized and hierarchical system where there's positional authority. We want this to function at a community level and as a community. I mean, think of it as if you were all getting together for a barn raising, right? That's an old American tradition. Your neighbors all come over and they help you build your barn. And then when the next guy wants to build his barn, you go over and spend a couple days at his place helping him build his barn, all right? This is like a barn building. Now, you're going to build your assembly, right? And so it's the same kind of community spiritedness that needs to prevail in creating and in running your assembly. It's not supposed to be like a corporation. And even if you've never known anything but a corporation, you need to wrap your heads around the idea of a community-based effort where everybody's basically equal. Some people have one set of skills and some people have another set of skills, but that doesn't mean that there's a hierarchy involved. And you all need to know that your chairman or chairwoman, the person that you elect to that position, is a spokesperson. So now I want to ask you, knowing that, how is it that you would ever elect someone who doesn't listen to you and who instead tells you what to do? Mm-hmm. We've had a repeated history of people following along and electing people to the chairmanship of assemblies who are inappropriate choices. And they're inappropriate not because they're bad people, but because their training and personality and mindset is still stuck in the corporate world, and they are still marching around like school marms or, school masters, telling you what to do instead of listening to you and working with you for something better for your state.
Right. The spokesperson, the chairman, takes direction from the assembly. The assembly tells the chairman what to say.
Right. And the assembly as a whole needs to know that. They need to act upon that. And if they've got a chairman who, instead of listening to them individually and collectively, somebody who just wants to, stand there and go, okay, students, you've got 5 pencils and a notebook, and today's lesson is, and this is all you're going to do. We do need to learn. Okay, that's not something I'm making any fun of. But we need to be looking at this in terms of a community effort with 4 pillars to build in each assembly. And we need to be looking at our resources and at our talents and skills in terms of arriving at the goal. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got a militia that needs to be built. You have a juror assembly that needs to be built. you have a international business assembly that needs to be built, and you need a general assembly that needs to be built. And each one of those requires a different focus and different skills. Now, there are some skills that play all across the board, right? But
yes,
in the main, you should be able to look around among yourselves and say, okay, well, let's see. We've got 3 ex-fire chiefs and a former policeman and a retired federal marshal and 17 guys who are retired Marine Corps officers and 15 guys who are retired naval officers, and we got 42 guys who are former enlisted. You know, you've got the beginnings of a good state militia. You've got experienced people coming from a variety of different public service backgrounds. You've got some military, you've got some firefighters, you've got some police, you've got the basics of experience right there, ready to start grappling with what it means to be a state militia.
right.
Okay? And, you know, you've got people like me who've studied law for years. All right? So we have a good idea.
The militia,
Sure.
the militia is all about community. It's all about building community, supporting community, education and training the community, and protecting the communities.
Right. Well, we've got a Swiss model from the cantons that the Swiss actually went ahead and founded and used the system that we were supposed to use. So we have their experience, and we even have their, we have a copy of their organizational plan, the way they do it in Switzerland. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to do it the same way. But the fact is that when all of this got started, we were supposed to have a system very similar to what they have to protect our communities. Now, right now, we've got this situation ongoing in Louisiana. 4 of our assembly members were pretty badly hit by Hurricane Ida. Now, wouldn't it be great if the Louisiana militia were properly assembled and ready to go down there and, you know, brace up the sagging house roof and get this done in a couple of days to put a house back together that's been damaged in the storm. You get a crew of 15, 20 guys together who have some carpentry and building skills, and they're coming in from other parts of the state that weren't harmed. You know, the guy on the ground can say, you know, hey, you know, it tore off half our roof here. Help! You know, we need some 12 by 4 pitch 18-foot rafters here. We need, you know, blah, blah, blah. We need 16 sheets of plywood. You know, wouldn't it be wonderful if all of the states had their militias up and operating so that when something like that happens, you could call the emergency relief desk at your local, your state assembly and say, help! And know that there were other people that were going to come to your assistance, and they were going to have the money from an assembly emergency fund to be able to buy that plywood and those nails and whatever else was needed. This is, you know, we are our own emergency response team.
Yes.
Those poor people down in Louisiana are sitting there, and FEMA has done nothing. It's going on the 3rd week, and they have, you know, there has been no assistance from the federal government or the state government at all. Nothing. All right? So This is par for the course. I went through this in 1995 myself. I can speak with firsthand knowledge. A wildfire swept through our small town and destroyed most of it. Took out 37,000 acres of trees and 400 homes, give or take a few. Well, you can imagine the kind of devastation that that really means. And now, you know, everybody who suffered from Hurricane Katrina, everybody who suffered from Hurricane Ida are going through the same thing. All you hear in the aftermath is dead silence and weeping. That's all you hear. You know, it's like a bomb went off and there's nobody to help, but you're standing there with your neighbors looking at each other going, what do we do? And what do we do it with? You know, there is no help. There is no, FEMA is not there to help you.
No.
What FEMA does is act as the risk management department for the federal government. They come around with a clipboard, they look at the damage to your house, they make an insurance offer, and they really lowball it, believe me, like 10% on a dollar. And then they offer you this check they call it a grant, but it's not a grant. That's your insurance settlement from the federal government on your house that they commandeered and used as collateral for their debts. These guys are so scumbag. They are so nasty. They are so self-centered. They are such charlatans. They are so crooked. It doesn't even begin to register with most people until they've gone through a disaster and you're left standing there wondering, well, where's the National Guard? You know, where's the soup kitchen? Where are the chemical potties, the porta potties? You know, where's the food bank? You know, where's the help that's supposed to be there? Well, your National Guard is in some godforsaken place like Afghanistan fighting a war because they're cheaper mercenaries than the regular army. And that's the actual honest-to-God fact.
Right. So getting back to the fact that the military is supposed to be liquidating all these corporations, what do we do to light a fire under their butt to do so?
Well, they're just beginning to learn that they have the capability of doing these things. And I have to say that some of them are making good use of it. Others, not so much. We've had a long-standing go-around with the provost marshals. They don't have any idea what their job is supposed to be. They're all a bunch of JAG officers who have nothing to do with the land, have no idea what the history is, and they're just sitting there going, okay? So we are having some success getting them up off of their little velvet puppets. But let's face it, the military has been in charge for a long time, and the military's made a hash of it. And so they're trying to find some way of, seizing defeat from the jaws of victory. You know, they're trying to cover up their mistakes and their faux pas and their leeching and their mismanagement and all the rest of it by doing these stupid false flags and all this, you know, Hollywood-style garbage, when what they should do is just come home. That's it, just come home and do their jobs. They've been working for us since 1789, but since 1863, they thought they were running the show. And the truth of the matter is that Abraham Lincoln was never an American president. He never had any executive orders to write. He never had that kind of power over this country. He had that over the officers under his direct command. And it's still that way today. All these executive orders that these foreign presidents put up has no effect on anyone here. It's just upon their officers. All right? So it's all BS. The labor code, BS. which means that all the rest of it that derived from it, all tainted by fraud. I mean, these guys really don't have a leg to stand on. And in order to recoup their honor and to, reform as a decent part of society, human population, they need to come home and just say, okay, well, Grandma, we messed up. Okay, so now we can fix it. Now we can all work together. The employers and the employees can sit down at the table and we can all get a grip on what the problems are and we can go on. And we don't need any bogus idea of nuclear war. We don't need any, we don't need any more explanations about the counterfeiting that went on against our, against the fiat currency that the Federal Reserve issued. We don't need a whole lot of, we don't need to spend our time mucking through the past so much as we need to solve problems right now. And there's plenty of time to go back and review things and to audit things and blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, what we really need to do is bring home the facts to the military. And just like a child that's caught with a hand in the cookie jar, the military has been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. That doesn't mean that you disown your child. It doesn't mean that you fly into a rage and flay the skin off their backs. It just means that, okay, we left the foxes in charge of the hen house. And so, guess what? Your grandma is watching you. There's no way you're going to get away with it, right? And it's the same kind of thing where they just have to come to the true realization that their duty is to the civilian population of this country that actually has been their employer since 1789. And there is no other employer, and there is no other duty, and there is no other higher calling. So hopefully the generals and the provost marshals and everybody else are beginning to go, yeah, there is that little section there that says that we're under the civilian power. Oh yeah, and civilian is not the same as civil power.
Do the assemblies need to do anything? Yeah, I was just going to ask.
Now that there are 50 state assemblies, there's no doubt that there is a civilian power present and in session. They got away with this so long because there wasn't a civilian government that they could look at and contact and say, oh, there's the civilian government. Well, guess what? Now there is.
And so should the assembly reach out and say, hey, please do your job. We're here. We need help.
I don't see anything wrong with that, Hello, the civilian government is in session in Kentucky. Hello, the civilian government is in session in New York. Hello. Joint Chiefs of Staff? Yep, we're all here, present and accounted for. And stop looking for loopholes and excuses. There are always reasons, there are never excuses. Just like my mother used to tell me when I got caught with my hand in the cookie jar. There are always reasons why you didn't come in until 4 o'clock in the morning, We heard about the flat tire, and yes, you really did have a flat tire. However, you could have called. we need to operate as a family here and show each other the respect that we've earned and are owed. But, you know, a lot of these military guys want me to bow down and scrape and be so impressed with their accomplishments. And my position is, hey, I'm your grandma. I know what you did and what you didn't do. Just get over it and get back to work. Do what you're supposed to be doing. Stop slacking
it's
off.
just
Stop
simple.
making excuses. Yes,
Right.
it is. It's very simple. I don't care what Abe Lincoln told you to do. This is here and now. He was full of you know what. So go forth and do what's right. Do it now. Think of now. You know, I'm not going to be standing here whipping and beating people for doing things that they did in ignorance. So the important part is not to be ignorant and to be honest and to do your job with good faith and service. And to protect this country against all enemies, both foreign and, in this case, very importantly, domestic. And what that means is domestic with respect to the United States subcontractors. So when you have people who are betraying America, whether they are employees of the municipal corporation or they are employees of the territorial government, that's a domestic enemy with respect to the military. Okay, because remember, we're foreign with respect to the military. Civilians live in a different world, different jurisdiction. But those enemies that are domestic to them just happen to be the ones that are really causing the problems. So it behoove the military to act upon their own domestic terrorists and their own domestic criminals. Now, I won't even dignify people like Joe Biden with being terrorists. They don't have a cause. They're just in it for the money. They're there to make a profit, come hell or high water. So, they're just criminals. They're just garden variety con artists and criminals. That's all, impersonators. There's no point in getting all steamed up. There's no point in dragging politics into it. It's just a matter of, okay, these guys have been defrauding the country and defrauding everybody, and so there it is. Arrest them.
Yeah,
They're domestic
and they're killing
enemies.
people. So, yeah.
They're domestic enemies. They're criminals, like Bonnie and Clyde, like the James Gang or worse. They're just like the Russian mafia.
Or Jim Jones.
Right. Well, when you've got a criminal problem, you have to have the sense enough to recognize that it's a criminal problem and not a political problem. Right. They would love to make this into a political problem.
Right.
They would love to make it into something, Democrats versus Republicans. They would love it. Because then they'd have an excuse, and they'd have two sides, and they could fight a war. But no, what it really is a matter of crime. It's just crime. And so, as such, these people are outlaws with respect to our law. And with respect to the military, they are domestic enemies that are acting in violation of the laws that they are supposed to be operating under in this country, which is the Constitution. Okay, first, foremost, and always, the Constitution. You know why they call it the law of the land, don't you? And why they make this big deal about it being the supreme law of the land. It's because the land is different than the sea. And so all these people, all these federal subcontractors are foreigners. Even if they were born in this country, when they are working for the federal government or one of the federal agencies, they're adopting a foreign citizenship. And they're working in foreign jurisdictions of the law. And all of those foreign jurisdictions of the law are the sea and the air. Okay? So when they are thinking about the law of the land, they're looking at it as a foreign law that they have to obey when they're on our soil. Okay? That's why it's called the law of the land, and so much, big foo-foo-rah is made over it. It's because it's a foreign law with respect to them. It's something that they have to know and obey when they're here in our country.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who tells them any differently is a foreign agent and an enemy, a domestic enemy against the Constitution by definition. All these guys that have been out there evading their obligations under the Constitution from FDR on down to today are criminals. They're in violation of our law. And our law counts because, guess what? It's our country, it's our land, it's our soil, and we're here. So, from every perspective that you can think of, what needs to happen is for the different foreign subcontractors, these different commercial corporations, to clean up their act, get back in compliance with their actual contracts and job duties, stop misaddressing Americans as if we were all U.S. citizens and dependents, employees of these corporations, which we most certainly are not, and to give back to their employers the respect and the due that is owed to us. They've been pillaging, plundering, and keeping track of the pillaging and plundering for 160 years. So it's time for an accounting.
Yes, indeed.
So, the Director of Fiscal Services is being called onto the carpet to deliver that accounting. And you could just hear the buttholes sinking up. What? Somebody actually dared to address the Fiscal Services Director?
They thought they were hiding all these years.
Well, yeah, they did, but they're not. And
no.
So it was a stellar moment. You could, it was like when Nelson Rockefeller said, "No, I paid no federal income taxes." The air sucked out of the room. And everybody kind of went, "Oh God, she knows."
All right. Well, it sounds.
Gee. Anyway, the rabbit trail is long and hard, and the hunting dogs have been out there until they're sore of foot and hungry. But nonetheless, as the day grows deeper into the evening, we have the fluffy bunny cornered. And we do know who the Director of Fiscal Services is. Yes, we do. So.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like our assemblies need to do another letter writing campaign to the Joint Chiefs and say, hey, we're here and we would like you to do your job for us.
Right. We've been employing you since 1789. Forget all the middlemen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We can do that. We love to write letters.
Yes. And everybody in the service who considers themselves a Christian had better remember that parable about how the landlord from far away returns and finds his servants in various different states of productivity and waste.
Right. Well, speaking of parables, you wrote a fabulous parable about likening our government to a dilapidated house.
Right. Exactly.
It was a beautiful, beautiful article.
Well, and I'm sorry I've been kind of quiet this past week, but as you can tell, I have been running at 150 miles an hour every day for every hour, and it's one of those fishing or cut bait situations where I can make progress on the banks and the vendor cards and all those things. I can make progress with the publications. I can make progress with the restoration of some of the wonderful books that people have been sending me. Oh, thank you very much, everybody who's been sending donations to our legal and history library. We've had some absolutely fabulous finds come in. People have been digging through their libraries and finding old books that one way or another they salvaged or their grandfather had, and they've been sending them, and we've been pouring through them, and it's been a fabulous week for insight into the history. And many of these books are what we call primary source books.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, they are books that are not secondhand. They are right here on the spot. This is what happened, and here I am to attest to it in 1620.
Cool.
You know? And a lot of these books, when you're reading them, some of the old ones, you know, in the 16 and 1700s, were done with a completely separate kind of typeface than what we use today. And they can be difficult to read. But what's even more difficult is that there's a different mindset. And depending on which country the particular book comes from, there is a different mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating to see how these different minds came together to create the modern world of law as we know it. Mm-hmm. And to see and to be able to prove, okay, prior to this point, this is the way things worked. And after this point, this is the way things worked. So you can track the gradual corruption of the law system into a legal system. And you have the primary source document in your hand to prove it.
Cool. That's very exciting.
Right. And it's one of those things that it's sort of anti-intuitive because it's what's not there that becomes important in a lot of cases.
Right. You've said that before.
Yes, like the probate courts. We have a situation where all these probate courts exist all over this country, and none of them have any authority to even exist. There is no authority for any probate court to exist, period. So, folks, if you're having trouble with a probate court, or anyone that you know is having trouble with a probate court, you just stand there and you look at that prosecutor and you say, well, and where is the authority for this court to exist in this country? And guess what? There isn't any. Once again, the big fat zero, when you really press them to it, they have no authorization to set up a probate court anywhere. And guess what happens when you actually bring that forward and force the prosecutor to answer? Well, in
Do they
numerous
scurry away?
occasions, in numerous instances, they literally close the court doors and you never hear from them again. If we ever do a movie, I want to reprise some things that happened this past week in California with a probate court that was trying to seize upon and sell property that belonged to a woman who died very suddenly this past year. And so they were trying to take the home from the husband and 2 kids. And the poor man was practically crying because, you know, number one, he'd lost his wife all of a sudden. And number 2, here these jerks were trying to take his home by a probate court. So he calls up, and as luck would have it, I had my 5 minutes of spare space in between between teleconferences, and I answered the phone, and I hear, Judge Anna, help! Well, and so I was able to say, well, go back into that court, and you grab the prosecutor's ear, and you say, where's the authority for a probate court to exist in this country? And then you would see the happy father and the 2 children walking down the steps of the courthouse, and you would see the robed denizen thereof shutting the doors behind them. Because that's what actually happened. The courthouse closed, and all the perpetrators were gone the next day. Imagine that.
Imagine.
And then that same father went down to the BLM office, and he did a record search, and he found the United States patent on his property, and he published his ownership of it in the newspaper, and took the first steps toward putting an end to all of their corruption and all of their interference and all of their misaddressing of his property.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Well, that's a good win.
Oh, it was wonderful. We had 1,700 federal prisoners released in one state alone. 1,700
Wow.
non-violent offenders released from federal prison this past week in one
Really?
state.
In one
And only
state.
God knows how many have been released in each state. We don't have those statistics yet. But non-violent offenders and Americans should not be in prison to begin with.
Mm-mm.
Okay? It's just part of their prisons for profit scheme. And now that we're on to them for that and charging them back for it, they don't like it much. So they are releasing federal prisoners that are non-violent offenders. And
Fantastic.
they're not messing around. They're wholesale, hundreds, thousands of them are being returned to the streets as we speak. And that's just fine, because as long as they're non-violent offenders,
They don't belong.
they don't belong in a federal prison. People that are non-violent offenders might have to do community service work or something of that sort. They might have to work and pay back the people that they stole from or whatever. But as long as they aren't a threat to the community, as long as they're not murderers and armed robbers and rapists and that kind of activity, then they don't belong in a federal prison. No. They don't belong in any prison or any jail anywhere at all. They need to be back supporting their homes and their families and working and earning and making a living like everybody else.
Right.
So, and when I'm talking about the vendor cards, I know that this sounds really wonderful to many people, and it is. But I want to point out, number one, that this is a recoupment on money that was owed to you. Okay, so it's not a welfare benefit. Number two, I want to point out to you that it's a precious inheritance from generations of Americans who were bilked in this fashion and defrauded. And it's a recoupment from them. It's from your great-grandparents and grandparents and parents and from your early days as a young worker yourself, okay? So it's not something to be squandered. It's not mad money, all right? It's an inheritance, and it's important that you view it as an inheritance and realize that it's not something that you should squander or think of as, I don't know what, it's not like winning the lottery, all right? And I'm going to advise everybody right now about the vendor cards and the relief. You're owed the relief, okay? No doubt about it. But what you need to do, and I'm just giving you the grandmother's advice, is to take that relief. Because again, this is kind of an opposite thing. It's not like they're coming in and giving you a whole bunch of money. It's you're being relieved of a whole bunch of debt. Okay? So the money that you were paying for a mortgage, say, or the money that you were paying on a college loan that was dragging you down, will suddenly be gone. And you'll have an opportunity to keep a larger share of your earnings for what would have otherwise been discretionary income. So now you have the opportunity to go ahead and get that dental work done that you wanted to do, but you couldn't because you couldn't afford it. It's time to put a new roof on the garage, okay? It's time to do the maintenance on your house. It's time to, talk over with your children what their plan is for going to school or technical, crafts and what they want to do with their life, okay? It's time for all those things that you were thinking of as extras to come into center stage, Have you been thinking about losing weight, for example, but you're just stuck at this desk job and you don't have time or energy to go out and deal with it? Well, now maybe it's time to make a career change. Now maybe it's time for you to start paying attention to your health, improving the quality of your food, going back to school, retraining for something that you really want to do. Rethinking where you live.
Well, for me, it seems like there's an incredible opportunity now, because when they are relieving their debt, they have more disposable income. Well, then they don't need that job in the corporation. They could actually come and work in the assembly, and we're going to be able to start paying people in the assemblies.
Yes.
And there's going to be a lot of services that can be provided. For example, helping people transition their business from public to private. You could offer a service to do that.
Right. Helping people to find their land patents.
Yes.
Helping people to form a business plan for that dream business they always wanted to have, or to improve a business that they've got going,
Or plant a garden.
Right. You've dreamed for 20 years about having your yard landscaped. Guess what? Oh, you want a solar power system as backup so you're not paying so much for electricity every year and you're not so dependent on the grid? Well, imagine. Suddenly, you don't have a mortgage. You can put that money into something else.
Right. Exactly.
Something that will improve your life and give you pleasure and improve the value of your investments and your home and your business and your the lives and the opportunities that your children have.
Right,
you can
your
do
quality of
tremendous
life.
things.
Yeah.
Right, the quality of your life can exponentially improve. We found in beta studies with people that suddenly were relieved of the debt and who had a stipend income coming in, we found that a lot of people quit second jobs, number one, because they no longer needed a second job. More homemakers, either mother or father, but one of the parents at least, elected to stay home with the kids. A return to a one wage earner family was made possible because you didn't need as much to get by. You didn't need as much money to have a decent life. And so in a lot of cases, married couples chose to, have someone at home with the kids.
Yes, and a return to a family unit,
Right, exactly. A lot of people decided, well, I hate this dead-end job I'm in, so I'm going to take this opportunity and go back to school. What an idea. I'm going to retrain for something I really want to do. And one of the young men that was in the beta study that did this went from being a very miserable day laborer who was barely, feeding himself and his dog, to becoming a highly skilled welder whose work is much in demand. And so, and this happened to be something that just connected with him that he wanted to do all his life, but never had the money and never had the support to go to school and learn how to do it. Well, we made it possible for him to go to school. We supported him in that, and boom, it's a whole different world. So
That's
a lot
wonderful.
of people, well, right, and it's a different world. His wife was extremely obese, and now she's making the effort to take care of herself and to really get serious about the health issues involved with obesity.
Yes,
These
indeed.
things,
Well,
these changes that are coming that everybody here can take advantage of as an assembly member and as an American are they're life-changing, they're profound, and they're for the better. But they're not Big Rock Candy Mountain, okay? They're not anything like winning the lottery. They're not anything that, I don't know, some of these people, you talk to them and they're waiting to become trillionaires. Well, most of us are not going to become trillionaires, just like, the white hats aren't going to ride over the horizon and save us. But we are going to save ourselves, and we are going to save our country, and we are going to enjoy relief from bogus debts that have been foisted off onto us. And we are going to become much more savvy consumers of government, and we are going to form a much better vision and understanding of what the American government is and how it's supposed to function versus any kind of foreign European-sponsored government. And along the way, we may discover some hidden abilities and talents that we never knew we had. We may find that we have the leisure time to contribute to our community far more than we ever thought we would. We may find that we have more skill and time to develop and to give to our families than we ever imagined. And we may find that instead of spending just 7 minutes a day with our children, we'll have the largesse to spend all day and to really enjoy our families and enjoy the process of having children and bringing them up in a way that is truly in line with American values and that is not some sort of evil, specious, engineered program
Right.
to
Well,
turn us all into zombies.
right. And, people can enjoy their lives without the heavy energy of the debt and the, worry and fear. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we addressed on it is there's a small percentage of people out there who have no debt, zero debt. And congratulations to them. I know you're one of them. And I want you to let them know that they can still benefit from the vendor card program. They would probably need to go out and get a credit card and then use that credit card to buy groceries and things, and then we could offset the credit card payment. Is that correct?
I'm not sure, Terry. I don't know what to expect. As you point out, I'm one of those that kept nose to grindstone all those many years and paid cash for everything and got along with an elderly car and just, as my mother used to put it, lived within my means, okay, so that I did not accumulate debt. And as I'm sitting here at age 65, I can safely say that I don't owe anybody anything except debts that I cannot repay and kindnesses that I will try to repay. I think back on my parents. I think back on friends that I've known throughout my lifetime, many of whom have passed on. And yes, I have debts, but they're not the kind that you can pay with money, okay? Instead, those kinds of debts you pay by giving someone else a chance, by teaching someone else something that you learned, by contributing to the community, by remembering someone. This is how we repay the real debts in life. The rest of it's just money. And the money, I said last week when this question was answered, well, virtue's its own reward. I've been able to sleep well and not worry about much of anything since 1998. So think about that. Think about the peace that comes from knowing that you are debt-free in this world. That there's nobody who's going to show up and go, grease the palms. And if the IRS comes knocking, you know what to tell them too. There's glorious freedom to be had. I was talking this week with a woman who's about my age, and she retired from a job that as a compliance officer for a large business that was involved in overseeing construction projects and that sort of thing. And so she would go around and she would make sure that the plumbing was right, or whatever it was that she was inspecting. So she retired, and she decided to live off grid. And so she went full bore into solar power, which in Alaska is difficult to do, but not impossible. And she has just a small kicker generator that will kick on and run the electricity if there isn't enough power generated by the solar panels. Okay? We got to talking about this, and she said, we had the electric company come in here, and they were going to cut down all our trees, and they were going to do all this stuff to our watershed, and blah, 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 blah. The government was going to come in here big time and mess up this whole little subdivision that we have here. But all of us on this particular subdivision have lived out here off the grid for years. You know, we've used different ways and means to generate electricity. We've used means to heat our homes, but we're all of us back here are off the grid. So we had our little homeowners meeting, and we went back to the electric company and we said, up yours. There are no utilities out here provided by the government, so there are no easements. There's nothing for you to do here. Bye.
Good.
Now, isn't that wonderful? And
Wonderful.
the government had to, the electric company had to draw on its horns and go packing on down the road. If more of us
Fantastic.
did that, then we would have the same option of telling them to go packing. We
Yep.
don't owe you anything. You didn't provide us with any services. Forget it. Bye. That's one
I love
answer. Another answer is that they have taken on all these easements and they have used them, they've collateralized them and used them as assets to fund above and beyond any program or service that they've ever delivered. Now, this causes a little problem because this is another form of fraud. And you may not know this, but a lot of this fraud was funded by the Rockefellers by doing exactly that, by claiming the easements on highways and utility corridors and electrical services as land belonging to or having that the utilities and the roads had an interest in. And so they collateralized the value of that land and used that for nefarious purposes. They didn't use it to plow it back into the, upkeep of the roads or to building new bridges or to improving electrical service. They used it as a slush fund for them and their political cronies. And so, although most Americans would never think about it, all those miles and miles and miles of roadway easements and utility and power easements, all those gas line easements, all that is very big money. It's all collateralized, it's all monetized, and they're raking in huge, huge, huge amounts of money off of that every year because it's millions of miles worth of land that they have an interest in, a quote-unquote insurable interest in, and they then collateralize that insurable interest, and they take all that money, and instead of pouring it back into the utilities and improving things, they just plain out and out steal it and slush fund it. And that's why one of the major players in this entire thing are the railroads. They got in it early, the robber barons. And then the utility companies, the electric companies, the gas companies, the water, sanitation, everything and anything that has any kind of land component to it. And you'll see that in some of the filings that we made early on, say 2011, were against the North American Water and Power Alliance.
Right.
Which is, like the Northern Trust.
Mm-hmm.
These are the names of some of the business entities that were used to slush fund vast holdings, vast amounts of money, vast amounts of they call it circulating capital. And it's circulating because they're investing it in various things, like they're investing it in treasury bonds, right? Or they're investing it in exchange commission securities, or they're investing it in the stock market, blah, 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 blah. All right. So all of this stuff is based on you giving them an easement to put through a road, or to put through an electrical line, or to put through a service, a water and sewer service. And I bet you never even thought that that little scrap of land gave them an opportunity to claim an interest in that land and to monetize it as an asset belonging to them, and that they were under no obligation to reinvest in improvements in the infrastructure that your land was supporting.
Doesn't all that stuff belong to us?
What? The electrical lines and all of that?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, it does, but it only belongs to you as an American. It doesn't belong to you as a U.S. citizen. So that's additionally how they've been getting along and away with that scheme, too, is that they just claim, oh, well, they're not really Americans, they're U.S. citizens, so you can go ahead and claim their property and, take title to it. Now, unfortunately, in order to keep the world from falling apart, we're going to have to continue to pay on the title system until we get back to our patent system. And from the patent system, we can get back to the final grants and things. But this easement system and all of the hash that they're making out of it without reinvesting in the infrastructure, that has got to stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you all need to be aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody needs to be thinking about this every time they drive past a telephone pole or see a gas meter. They need to be thinking, they've got an easement on my property. It may only be 20 feet wide, but it's right in the middle of my private property. And they're claiming it and making money off of it and charging me. And on top of it, the electrical company is sitting there as a cooperative telling me I'm a member and accruing all these capital credit accounts, often worth tens of thousands of dollars, and not paying me a penny. Now, if this is a cooperative, what's it a cooperative of? And why am I not getting my share?
Cooperative of criminals is what it is.
They have engineered all of this in a very sneaky and very underhanded way. And they have used the proceeds to work calumny against everybody. They have not reinvested. You would think that if you had a lot of profit coming in from the railroads, that you would invest in more railroads. But no, they got to a certain point and thought, well, wait a minute, that's competing with my trucking investments and my petroleum investments, because trucks use a lot more petroleum than a railroad. Therefore, I'm going to sit back and let the railroads decay because they're in competition with trucking, and trucking uses petroleum, and I'm invested in petroleum. That's how they're thinking. It has nothing to do with what's good for the environment, what's good for the country. It has only one thing in mind, and that is profit. Okay? And a very narrow definition of profit. And that's why these people are psychotic. they have forgotten that there are other values other than profit. And I know that I've said this before, but they are worse than Ferengi. I mean, you think of the Star Trek characters, Quark, always thinking about the, 110th law of acquisitions, okay? This is the way these people think. They're taught to do that from the time that they're tiny. Their parents corrupt them and mess them up and brainwash them and dehumanize them to a point where they're sick people. They're not really, And so just be aware that those easements are valuable, that they have been monetized for many years, that the money from them has gone into slush funds. Those slush funds have not been used to repair the infrastructure. They've been used for numerous illicit and ugly purposes. Be aware that the oil and gas industry has been promoting itself to an incredible extent, and they have succeeded so far in doing some very good things and some very bad things. And we need to be
blood money.
We need to be encouraging more of the good and bitch slapping the bad. That's we really we have been reneged in our efforts as consumers and as public watchdogs when it comes to the oil companies are things. They are mindless, faceless things. Okay, entities. And they may have a board of directors, but most of these commercial corporations are C corps or S corps, and in any case, they have one thing that they guarantee to their shareholders, and that is that they will exist for profit.
Right.
And because they only exist for profit, they have no conscience. And they will produce a bad product that sells just as fast as they will produce a good product that sells. And it is our responsibility as consumers and as the people of this country to become aware of it when these corporations produce bad products. And it can be drugs, it can be plastics, it can be fertilizer. We have to be the ones that walk up to Mr. Big Oil and say, gee, thanks a lot for this. And by the way, this won't work. This. And here's why. We need to open up those dialogues with multiple industries. We need to open up the dialogue with Big Pharma. We need to open up the dialogue with the oil industry. We need to open up the dialogue with the utilities. And nobody's been doing this. They've all been on the gravy train. All these people in Congress, forget it. Either they're brainless, and believe me, there are some people in Congress who really, truly don't have two gray cells between their ears, or they're corrupt and on the take, and there's a lot of that, or they're there for some particular small or relatively small cadre of special interests. And, I'm not pointing any fingers here. I'm just giving you an example of the sorts of things that go on where, you've got somebody who's in the pocket of the utility companies, and that's really their only interest is to, provide support for the utility companies. They're not there to represent anybody back home. And we've had a lot of congressional and senatorial seats, even in the foreign corporations, okay? We've had people that just lie through their teeth to get elected, 2 seats on the board of directors of these corporations. And then when they go to Washington, D.C., they vote the exact opposite of what they told the voters back home. And there's no recourse. A senator elected to either the municipal or the territorial Congress has 6 years in which to do anything they like. And the only time that the voters get to catch up to them is once every 6 years. There is no recall provision in the corporate government to recall a sitting senator in their system. So we have lots of examples where people who are actually Democrats and whose family are long-term Democrats going back to the 1930s, or even communists coming forward and saying that they're Republicans and that they're conservatives, right? Just flat out lying through their teeth. And somehow there's no vetting. You know, the Republican Party hasn't even bothered to go back and look up the pedigrees of their candidates, so they don't know. You know, if you had someone who was the granddaughter of Mayor Daley claiming to be a Republican, wouldn't you stop a moment and think? And then when you elect that person and they go to Washington, D.C., and they vote a Democratic ticket on virtually everything that comes by, wouldn't you go, we have Republican parties so stupid in this country that have supported rhinos for generations that you wonder why there is a Republican Party. And maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe there really isn't any social distance or social difference between the two. Because on one side, you've got all of the dependent wannabe, groveling, grabbing, trying to, get to the trough. And on the other side, you've got the big pigs that are already at the trough. And so who cares? It's all just an ugly sideshow that really shouldn't exist. It didn't exist in this country prior to the 1850s. Okay? So when we're talking about going back to our assemblies and to the American way, we don't have political parties. They do not exist. They're not supposed to exist. All those are political lobbies that are fighting for their share of the trough. All right? And what we have to do as Americans is say, forget that, it's our trough. Go away, piggies!
Yep.
You know?
Exactly.
So,
yes.
My thoughts on that for the day.
Yeah, I second that. So Anna, those 2 hours flew by, and so we're wondering what's going on for projects this week.
Well, we're getting ready for the graduation of the marshals from their first phase of training. As I said, they had an exhaustive test and they all passed with a 95% or better. We had one guy who got 100%.
Yay, Paul.
And he just happens to be the chief marshal, Paul Pappas.
Yay, Paul. Congratulations. That's awesome.
And so we're going to be trying to plan some, a little bit ahead here. We're taking this as very good news, and we are looking forward to having some surprises for those guys.
Nice.
We're working on the Continental Marshals program this week, and on getting them fully set up and ready, and getting their commissions prepped, and really putting the hammer down and working on the Continental Marshals program. Of course, there's the banking end of it. We've been going like hamsters in a cage here for weeks now, and we have the primary groundwork, I would call it, the primary structure all laid out. We've instituted numerous recoupment actions, and we are it's now in the hands of our professional bankers. They have to get their part of it all put together to mesh with what we've put together, and then we begin our operations.
Woohoo! Yay!
As I said, we're definitely looking at getting the backlog of the Sign in America claims, and then the issuance of the vendor cards to those people who are already signed up with their assemblies in the Sign in America program. That does not mean that other people won't be able to apply and get relief. But
right.
Those of you who have gone the full Monty, as they say, and you have signed up and you've done your paperwork, you are first in line, first in time, and we have every intention of making sure that you are given priority handling status to get relief from any kind of debt claim.
Right.
So we're continuing to go forward with all that, and then we're beginning the analysis of these wonderful books that we've gotten, and we have reading committees set up. And we're looking forward to the publication of one of our friends is Bill Elwood, and we're looking forward to the publication of his book, which will be about the juries and the jural assemblies, and about the court system as it should exist versus as it does exist, and explaining in more detail. And that is close to publication here soon. And so I'm looking forward to getting my hands on a copy of that. I'm sure that there will be points of contention that if Bill and I had time to argue over, we'd come to a compromise position on. I'm sure it won't be 100%. You can't put two lawyers in a room and have it be quiet. There's always, no, you're wrong. Yeah, you're right. No. But anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing his latest effort. I really am, and I think that it will, perhaps with a few tweaks. I'll just put it in my comments, okay?
You can do an annotated version.
Yes, I'll do my annotated version. But I'm looking forward to that, and it should be published very soon. And we'll have some of our own publications coming out here to help the assemblies with orientation of new people. And so we're putting money in doing the final edits on that. What else? Just beginning the whole process of consolidating the archives and moving everything, and
moving it to the new bank building.
Yeah, well, exactly. We're in the process tonight, in fact, and I've been tearing things apart and reorganizing, paper files and books, you name it. My house looks like it exploded from the inside and just kind of came to a stop at each of the walls. I mean, it's insane. And when I get to my storage units, it's even going to get worse. Thank God they're heated storage units, because there's a lot of sorting to be done, and then it all has to get scanned, it all has to get relocated, and there's multiple places for it to go. So it looks like a beehive around here. But at the end of the day, when all of it's sorted and everything is organized and it's available, it's going to be so much easier, and we will be able to provide so much more service, because instead of hunting and pecking for everything always, we'll have it all in a neat way, consolidated and at our fingertips. So it may take us, I don't know, it took us 20 years to develop all this stuff. It may take us a couple of years to get it organized. But the good news is we are getting more people, we're getting more volunteers, we're training those volunteers, and a lot of them who started out with pretty simple jobs, you know, maybe their job was to just make phone calls, or maybe their job was to answer phone calls and make referrals to other people. But as they've done that, they've learned what other people do. And in the process, they've worked into other positions. And so we're seeing that kind of entry and training, and then taking over a duty, and then more entry and more training and taking over another duty. And at each level, more people are getting trained up. So that is very, very encouraging. And, you know, you'll probably start hearing new voices from the Federation. You know, when you dial in the phone, you'll hear a different voice than what you're expecting. And that's because that process is happening.
So exciting.
Yes, it's very exciting. And more Americans are taking the time and bringing forward their skills. And I'm sure that is just, it's going to boot up exponentially over the next year and a half, because there are so many things that need to be done. I mean, we're going to need people that can specifically explain the Sign in America program. Mm-hmm. We're going to need people who can explain the vendor card program. We're going to need IT teams that are specifically able to act as troubleshooters for the vendor card program. And they're all going to have to be trained. We're going to need people that can do oversight for the assemblies to make sure that assembly funds aren't being embezzled or rat-holed through some slush funding, or, you know, all that kind of stuff. We're going to need people that can work on the land patents for people that want to find and claim their land patents. We're going to need people who can act as new hosts for within the assembly. We need an orientation program. It's a training program, but we also need gentle, good people who love their fellow Americans, who will come forward and act as mentors to people who are entering this in a daze. People who are still going, what happened?
Exactly.
Yeah. And so we need, along with the orientation materials and programs, we need to develop people in each assembly who will be kind of the meet and greeters that act as helpers to help people who have been brutalized and battered and hurt. And, you know,
right.
Sometimes I'm a tough love granny, you know. My grandma used to say, "Come here, I'll pick you up." You know, I'd fall down, I'd be bawling because I scraped my knee. She'd smile at me and she'd say, "Come here, I'll pick you up." And at the time, I thought she was the most horrible granny in the world, but she actually was the best granny, because she taught me that, you know, when life is tough and when you've been dealt a blow, you each have to suffer that blow, and you have to figure out what to do with it. And other people can help you. I mean, she could show me how to wipe the blood off my knee and wash the wound and put a bandage on it. But she couldn't wave her hand and make the pain go away. And I'm afraid that's the kind of grandma I am. I want to teach my children how to bind up their own wounds and take care of their own situations. Not because I couldn't do it for them, and not because I don't love them, wouldn't do it for them, but because they have to learn how to do it themselves, you know? And so this past week I got a call from a young guy in, I think it was Florida, that had been picked up for like a speeding ticket, that sort of thing, and had been really run through the ringer on it. And I wasn't all that comforting, you know. Number one, you know what the speed limit is. All right. So if you go tearing 70 miles an hour through a residential neighborhood where the signs are posted at 35 miles an hour, and you think that your rights as an American to travel freely overweigh the need for teenagers and young children to be able to play safely, you need to rethink your values, okay? And number two, when you do get brutalized by police, it's probably because you're being, you know, either in the wrong place at the wrong time, and just, you know, you happen to be the goat for the day, or you've been mouthy. And I could tell this guy was very mouthy. The fact is that everybody has rights, and your rights begin and end where other people's rights begin. And a child's right to live and be safe in their own little neighborhood with posted residential miles per hour signs has to be weighed against your right to tear through there at 70 miles an hour. Guess who loses in that particular instance? We are all part of an interlocking world, a community, in which we are called upon to be more responsible as Americans than the U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens are understood to be under orders, to be indentured servants in the case of the territorial employees, or to be slaves in the case of the municipal employees. And as such, they are not as responsible, and therefore they don't have as much freedom either. But when we have greater freedom, our law and our tradition requires us to act according to a higher standard. And I have said this many, many times to many people, and still some people are not getting the message. Our standards are higher, not lower. When we do something irresponsible and it results in harm to another person, I should say one of the people or their property, then our law is very draconian. If you go out and rustle our cows, you're dead. Okay? If you go out and you drink and drive and you're caught speeding and it's dark night and, oh wow, I just didn't see that dad and his son coming home from the field and I just, you know, knocked him willy-nilly and, you know, killed the son and maimed the father, guess what? We don't have any provisions for involuntary manslaughter or you know, we don't care if you had a bad childhood or you were mad because you had a fight with your girlfriend and had been drinking. Oh no. And under our law, you killed a child and you maimed a man and you're going to swing for it. Okay? So this is not some sort of a get out of jail free card where you can just go out and cause trouble and go, oh, I'm free! I'm going to just ignore everybody and everything. No, it doesn't work that way. It works the exact opposite. The more free you are, the more responsible you are. And that is a literal fact of the law of the land. And I hate to break it to all of the anarchists among us who think that freedom is lack of responsibility, but it is the exact opposite. Anyway, I gave that young man quite a talking to. And I also explained that, no, I'm not responsible for the condition of your assemblies. I'm not responsible for how well they serve their members. I'm afraid, folks, that there are certain things that assemblies can do and certain things that they can't do if they're going to be American assemblies. Okay? But beyond that, there is a concern about security and liability for the assemblies. There's concerns about following the actual laws that do apply, like acting in insurrection against the government is not allowed, sorry. Having secret meetings where you plot various illegal things, not allowed. And we are responsible for those sorts of errors on the parts of assemblies. But the assemblies have the responsibility to assemble themselves. This is America. This is self-governance. You do have the option of walking up the hill and picking those blueberries or not. Okay? They don't just gravitate by magic and fall into your pail. You have the option of self-governance and freedom and responsibility that goes with it. Or you can sit there and suffer whatever slings, arrows, and corruption you want to be victim to. So I want everybody to see the assembly for what it is. It is the established structure that Americans use to organize their government. Okay? And it is 100% the obligation, responsibility, and mission of every member of every assembly to say to it that that's what happens. It is your responsibility if you let your assembly decline into a snake pit of slander, gossip, innuendos, fear-mongering, and paranoia. It's up to you not to let it do that. It's up to you to look around and look at the actual work that needs to be done and to figure out how to do it. Okay? There isn't a cookie cutter that tells you, oh, this is how you have to set up your committee structure. You have to look at the structure and the purpose of that structure and figure out how best to support it. Just like building a house. It's a structure, And if you have to use flying buttresses, it's probably somewhere that is a little bit different. But anyway, you are responsible. Your assemblies are responsible. I cannot do the international and global work and take care of managing what goes on in your assemblies. You're going to have to learn how to do that yourself. All right? And we will have help. We already have help. But there will be more help available for asking questions. There will be more help for things like IT. There will be more help for, the bank issues and things for people. But at the end of the day, this is just like grandma saying, come here, I'll pick you up. Okay? This is what you've got to learn how to do. This is what you have to pass on to your grandchildren. This is the American government. You're rebuilding it. You're restoring it. Okay? So standing around and blaming other people for what doesn't get done or what isn't available in terms of services just isn't going to cut it, because you are responsible for serving yourselves. You are responsible for serving each other, and you are all responsible for knowing what the officials are supposed to be doing in their jobs and holding them to it. Okay? So, just like my grandma told me, come here, I'll pick you up, what she really meant was, come here, I'll show you how to clean your wounds. I'll show you how to bandage your knee and put the goop on it to keep it from getting infected. I'll do all of that for you. And then you'll learn how to do it for yourself. Okay? We have provided over 3,000 articles, books, multiple books, including the General Assembly Handbook. And this past week, I was tagged with at least 6 people who wanted to come forward and complain bitterly and raise big concerns because their questions hadn't been answered. And lo and behold, in every single case, the questions had been answered. They just hadn't done their homework. In an effort to cut down on that kind of activity, folks, I suggest that everybody in every assembly sit down and read the Judicial Handbook. We're going to be coming out with a new edition of it. Hopefully we will answer questions that weren't answered. We will, get the little things here and there that didn't make sense or that, were called into question or whatever in the first edition. But start out with the first edition and, really think about it. You'll find that an awful lot of your questions are already answered. And in the meantime, you have an exceptional resource in that you can go to www.annavonreitz.com and you can hit the search bar and you can type in IRS or driver's license or anything else that you can think of, and it will take you to articles that talk about that topic. So you've already got a tremendous resource right there, ready to go. And there are more tremendous resources available at the American States Assembly.net website, where you can have interactive program. You can do classes online to learn different aspects of this. There's all sorts of stuff here available for people to learn. And instead of letting your own questions rattle around in your head and become a big issue, and then taking it to your assembly chairman and your committee chairman, and then calling me up in the middle of the night and saying, what? Please realize I've got more than enough to do my job right now. And it's in a different jurisdiction than the assemblies. Please make use of all these many, many different resources that are available. And also, please know that if you get anybody telling you that I'm a Vatican agent or anything else of that ilk, you already have all the answers that you'll ever need on God's green earth in the books that I've already published. In fact, you will find that a complete explanation of everything is available at Amazon.com. Not that I want to, plump Amazon's coffers, but you can order Disclosure 101 and read to your heart's content everything that happened prior to our 2015 release of Something's Wrong When, an American Affidavit of Probable Cause. Now, if you read those two books, you're going to have the history of me and my husband and the general lay of the land of what this entire history is. You may not have it to the detail that you want, but if you're still searching and looking for more information, I've just given you two really good available sources where you can research any topic you want. Please do not bring your topics forward until you have made an honest, good faith effort to educate yourselves using all of the materials that we have already provided. Okay? And if you're caught speeding 70 miles an hour in a 25-mile-an-hour school zone, don't expect me to do anything to help you. Okay? Just stand there and go, oh, that wasn't responsible. I don't care. The lives of those kids is more important than your ability to speed. Okay? So this isn't a freebie ride to being irresponsible and careless and reckless. This is an exactly opposite side of the story where, yeah, you have more freedom, but you also have to be more wise and more responsible in exercising that freedom. All right, folks, I've been talking too long, and I do need your help. We did make our goals. We did get into our new property. We are busily moving stuff. We are filling up the fuel tanks, and we are getting the electrical service transferred over, and we are doing all of the things that go with moving. And of course, that's quite a physical burden on a lot of the people here in Alaska who have to do that by Shanksmere. But we're getting it done. We have already encountered several $1,000s worth of expenses related to that changeover and winterizing and, getting the fuel tank stopped off and all of that sort of stuff. And I'm sure that over the course of the next week, we'll be facing expenses for other organizational aspects of it. We'll have to haul in the computer equipment to do all this. And I'm sure that there are things that we will need to buy to expand upon our computer capability and our security network and all the rest of it. So we're kind of in the build-out phase where we're actually grappling with, okay, well, now we've got the space. What are we going to do with it? So we need money for that. We still have our folks down in Louisiana who are still in desperate need. So anybody who has ideas and thoughts and plans and has some extra shekels or, has the compassion in their heart to be concerned about their neighbors in Louisiana, then please give us a call and we'll see what we can do on our end. And certainly we'll be trying to scrimp and save our pennies and send money to them too, as we can. And last but not least, we have all of the publication work for the new people that we expect will be pouring into our assemblies once they sent the vendor card magic. We're preparing to see all of the cousins, aunts, and uncles of every assembly member that used to stand around and poo-poo our assembly members and call us tin hats. They're all going to be the first ones in line, and you all know it. So it may be a moment of personal satisfaction to the many of you who have suffered through it all. But on the other hand, it's going to mean that the assemblies are flooded. And they're going to be flooded with a whole bunch of ignorant new people who never had any idea that this was going on in the first place. And they all have to be educated, and they have to be somewhat controlled in the beginning. Otherwise, they're going to bring in all of the garbage from the corporate world and try to make it apply to our assemblies. And we can't have that. We have to continue on with our tradition, with building American assemblies, not U.S. district assemblies, okay? So we've got to come up with a plan to deal with all the new people that need to be educated and brought along. And I guess one of the words that we might use for this is recultured. They have to come into a different understanding of what this means and what it's all about, you know. And so we have a lot of education to do, a lot of publication to do. And it's just a tremendous amount of work, and it is expensive because, for example, I got the best deal I could hope to get on 50,000 cards that are like rack cards. They're like big rack cards, okay? $4,200. No? But that rack card will save our assemblies from having to explain the difference between an American assembly, a municipal assembly, and a district assembly. Okay? And that's a key thing. So that's going into our orientation pack. And, you know, there are different pieces of information that are absolutely essential for people to get right up front when they walk through the door. And we're preparing that now. But it's costly. Anyway, so we're getting ready for the flood. And we're working as hard as we can to get everything moved and situated with our new building. And we are working on the archives and the elderly law books and things, histories and other things that have been entrusted to our care. And we're still in the process of matching up the banking world and the structures of our assembly account, chart of accounts. So it will, you know, I don't know. It might take two weeks. That's mean. But
on wood.
You know, yeah, it may take a couple of weeks yet while we're still struggling along here. I don't know for sure, but I do know that our bankers are working hammer and tongs. I do know that everybody is showing the best of good faith so far, and I have no reason to think that we're not going to succeed and that this is going to be a wonderful thing. So we go forth and hopefully we conquer. And so if you have a few extra shekels and you want to put some speed on the bank project and help us out with our build out, we would certainly welcome it. If you want to contribute to the folks in Louisiana, just put a little tag note and say, okay, this $25 is for Louisiana, and I will do my best to go through and sort those out and send the money on to our coordinators in Louisiana. They've been doing an excellent job of reporting back on progress, and we were able to raise over $1,000 last week. Immediately, you know, after this broadcast, we were able to raise over $1,000. That certainly helped to pay for some food and for some tools and materials to help those folks, and they are our assembly members and they are Americans. And so if you want to make a donation toward Relief for Louisiana, just add a little tagline saying so. And if you want to help us with any kind of information, books, publications, things that you think are of importance, that you've been hiding under the bed, that have been sitting on your shelf unread for 40 years. Now, I'm sure that the Archive Project will welcome it greatly and gleefully and happily, and you'll have the reading committees paging through the books and working their little butts off. So, thank you for the stamp donations this week. It was wonderful. I got vintage stamps that have the dollar amounts on the stamps, which are wonderful and are necessary for part of our work. And we got rolls of stamps so that we can do that. We did suffer a minor tragedy. Somewhere in the chaos of moving, I misplaced my entire stock of thank you cards. And so when Sunday afternoon rolled around, I was sitting there going, so anyway, I lost all my thank you cards in the shuffle, but I did manage to find other things that I could write on and send out my thank yous anyway. But anyway, those sorts of things happen all the time. I didn't lose the stamps. I managed to hold on to those just fine. So thank you all for sending stamps. Those always come in handy. And thanks especially to a major donor who contributed enough to help us recoup from some of our recent losses. And I really do thank you across the miles, and you know who you are. And so everybody, we're all pulling together. It's sort of like Red Green says to the old Possum Lodge membership. We're all in this together. Keep your stick on the ice. And we really do appreciate all of the prayers and the help and the volunteers and the offering plate that everybody brings forward, and all of the skills that are going into this at this point that are helping to build a monumental and successful government for, of, and by the people of this country. So if you can help in any way, we're here. We're doing our bit. We know you're all out there doing your bit. And we thank you. And we extend our heartfelt thanks across the miles for all the help that you send and that you give on a weekly basis to your assemblies. And I'm still acting as chief quartermaster, bottle washer, and overall overseer of the primary funds here. So if you have some extra shekels that you can spare your government, the actual government, the only one that's out here fighting for you at this point, the fastest way to get us help is through PayPal. And the PayPal address is the same as the email address. It's avanavon@gmail.com. And it's AVANNAVON@gmail.com. And the snail mail address for stamps and books and an occasional letter about whatever and checks and money orders and all that sort of thing is Anna Maria Reisinger, Reizinger, in care of Box 520994 in Big Lake, Alaska. That's 99652. And I want to just say that we should all be thinking very good, very high, supportive thoughts about our Continental Marshals program. I had an opportunity to explain it again, and it's being very well received. It's being well understood, and our guys are going over the top when it comes to their training goals. So keep them all in your prayers, and again, congratulations. to Paul Pappas for his 100% score, and to all of his compatriots in the marshals program, none of whom scored less than 95. That's an A by anybody's standard. Way to go, guys. God bless everybody. I'm sure it's going to be a very busy week ahead. If anything comes up that is really, really, really important, we will try to put together an emergency broadcast of our own and give you a heads up, good or bad. And we'll be working, and we will be thinking of all of you. We will be doing our best to deliver the care and protection and service that you all deserve. Good night.
Good night, Anna. Thank you so much for a wonderful webinar and all the fantastic information that you shared. And of course, we send our love and our gratitude for everything that you, your team, your family do. And we're so excited for the future. Thank you for everything that you do.
Hopefully, the future will come graciously and happily and with joy. And that's the way it should be. So let's all keep centered on that going forward. Good night. Godspeed. God bless. Love to you all. Good night.
Good night, Anna. God bless. Love to. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. There you have it. And boy, lots to look forward to. There's just so much fantastic things that have happened and are continuing to happen. And I know everybody out there is very excited. Some people are nervous, but please try not to be nervous. You really want to put the right positive energy out there. And there's no need to worry. There's no need to be nervous. There's no need to fear. My goodness, the time is now to release that fear, any fear. The time is now. And so keep yourself in the higher vibrational planes and send love, send gratitude, practice your gratitude every day. Call in your angels, teachers, and spirit guides and ask them for the guidance. And then do everything that you can to self-govern. Take responsibility for yourself, for your life, your family, your assembly, your neighborhood, your city, your county, and of course your country, and of course our beautiful Mother Earth. And for those of you who have not yet started the process, please get busy and go to the AmericanStatesAssembly.net. Sorry, I'm trying to click share, and I'm clicking the wrong button. I was very technically challenged today. Sorry about that. Anyways, what we're trying to do is bring up the AmericanStatesAssembly.net, which is here. And you want to go to correct your status here. And here's the information for you. You've got jump buttons that will talk about how to notarize, how to autograph, get you the document templates, and how-tos and work employers and forms. And then chart your course is everything else, all the supporting documentation. You've got your 928 documents, which is the full body armor, information about your birth certificate, walking through your fear. If you're still in fear, please watch this. Marriage paperwork, revocation of election to pay taxes, and passport, military retirement, insurance, your fee schedule, how to transition your business. All the other information is here. And we also have a series of open training calls. And this is designed to help you be more knowledgeable about certain topics such as the common law. What is the common law? How does it work? Christine on Indiana has a lot of training on the dead baby scam, the blood money series. She goes through the current articles by Anna von Reitz and the excellence of the common law with Brent Allen Winter's book. We've got litigation committee calls, medical tyranny calls. We've got working with the energy of love, recording secretary calls. So lots and lots of information available for you. And of course, our webinar every Monday. And that's this call here. And so get busy. If you have not yet corrected your status, get busy because we need you and this is the place that you want to be. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I send my love and my gratitude to each and every one of you. Have a wonderful week. We'll see you here again next week. God bless and good night.